Subhuti, if there were as many Ganges river as the number of grains of sand in the Ganges, would you say that the number of grains of sand in all those Ganges rivers would be very many? Subhuti answered, very many indeed, most honored one. If the number of Ganges river were that large, how much more so would be the number of grains of sand in all of Ganges rivers. Subhuti, I will declare a truth to you. If a good man or a good woman filled over 10,000 galaxies of worlds with the seven treasure for each grains of sand in all those Ganges river, and gave it all away for the purpose of compassion, charity, and giving up, would this man or woman not gain great merits and spread much happiness? Subhuti replied, very much so, honored one. Subhuti, if after studying and observing even single stanza of the sutra, another person were to explain it to others, the happiness and merits that would result from this virtuous act would be far greater. Furthermore, Subhuti, if any person in any place were to teach even 4 lines of this sutra, the place where they taught it would become sacred ground and would be revered by all kinds of beings. How much more sacred would the place become if the person then studies and observes the whole sutra? Subhuti, you should know that any person who does that would surely attain something rare and profound. Wherever the sutra is honored and revered, there is a sacred site in sharing the presence of Buddha or one of the Buddha's most venerable disciples. Subhuti said to Buddha, by what name shall we know this sutra so that it can be honored and studied? The Buddha replied, this sutra shall be known as the diamond that cut through the illusions. By this name, it shall be revered and studied and observed. What does his name mean? It means that when the Buddha named it, he did not have in mind any definite or arbitrary conceptions, and so named it. The sutra is hard and sharp, like a diamond that will cut away all arbitrary conceptions and bring one to other shore of enlightenment. What do you think, Subhuti? Has the Buddha taught any definite teaching in this sutra? No, the Buddha has not taught any definite teaching in the sutra. What do you think, Subhuti? Are there many particles of dust in the vast universe? Subhuti replied, yes, many, most honored one. Subhuti, when the Buddha speaks of particle of dust, it does not mean I am thinking of any definite or arbitrary thought. I am merely using these words as a figure of speech. They are not real, only illusions. It is just the same with the word universe. These words were words. Do not assert any definite or arbitrary idea. I am using these words as words. Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Buddha be perceived by means of these 32 physical characteristics? No, most honored one. The Buddha cannot be perceived by his 32 physical characteristics. Why? Because the Buddha teaches that they are not real, but are merely called the 32 physical characteristics. Subhuti, if a good and faithful person, whether male or female, has for the sake of compassion and charity been sacrificing their life for generation upon generation, for as many generations as the grains of sand in 3,000 universes, and another followers have been studying and observing even a single section of the sutra and explains it to others, the person's blessings and merits would be far greater. At that time, after listening to the sutra, Subhuti had understood its profound meaning and was moved to tears. He said, "What a rare and precious thing it is that you should deliver such a deeply profound teaching. Since the day I attained the eyes of understanding, thanks to the guidance of the Buddha, I have never before heard teaching so deep and wonderful as this. Most honored one, if someone hears the sutra and pass pure and clear confidence in it, they will have a profound insight into the truth. Having perceived that profound insight, the person will realize the rarest kind of virtue. Most honored one, that insight into the truth is essentially not insight into the truth, but is what the Buddha called insight into the truth. Most honored one, having listened to the sutra, I am able to receive and retain it with faith and understanding. This is not difficult for me, but in ages to come, in the last 500 years, if there is a person who hears the sutra, who receives and retains it with faith and understanding, then the person will be a rare one, a person of most remarkable achievement. Such a person will be able to awaken pure faith, because they have ceased to cherish any arbitrary notions of their own selfhood, other selves, living beings, or a universal self. Why? Because if they continue to hold an arbitrary conception as to their own selfhood, they will be holding on to something that is non-existent. It is the same with all arbitrary conceptions of other self, living beings, and universal self. These are all expressions of non-existent things. Buddhas are Buddhas because they have been able to discard all arbitrary conceptions of forms and phenomena. They have transcended all perceptions and have penetrated the illusions of all forms. The Buddha replied, "So it is, Subhuti. Most wonderfully blessed will be those beings who, on hearing the sutra, will not be trembled, not be frightened or terrified in any way." And why? The Buddha has taught the sutra as the highest perfection, and what the Buddha teaches as the highest perfection, that also the innumerable blessed Buddha do teach. Therefore is it called the highest perfection. Subhuti, when I talk about practice and transcendent patience, I do not hold on to any arbitrary conceptions about the phenomena of patience. I merely refer to it as a practice of transcendent patience. And why is that? Because when thousands of lifetimes ago the prince of Kalinga severed the flesh from my limbs and my body, I have no perception of a self, a being, a soul, or a universal self. If I had cherished any of these arbitrary notions at the time my limbs were being torn away, I would have fallen into anger and hatred. I also remember, Subhuti, that during my 500 previous life, I have used life after life to practice patience and to look upon my life humbly, as though I were a saint, called upon to suffer humility. Even then, my mind was free of arbitrary conceptions of the phenomena of myself, a being, a soul, or a universal self. Therefore, Subhuti, disciples should leave behind all distincts of phenomena and awaken the thought of the attainment of supreme enlightenment. The disciples should do this by not allowing their minds to depend upon ideas evoked by the world of the senses, by not allowing their minds to depend their ideas steered by sounds, odors, flavors, sensory touch, or any other qualities. The disciple's mind should be kept independent of any thoughts that might arise within it. If this disciple's mind depends upon anything in the sensory realm, it will have no solid foundation in any reality. This is why Buddha teaches that the mind of disciple should not accept the appearances of things as a basis when exercising charity. Subhuti, as disciple practice compassion and charity for the welfare of all living beings. They should do it without relying on appearances and without attachment, just as the Buddha declares that form is not form. So he also declares that all living beings are in fact not living things. Subhuti, if one on the hand, a son or daughter of the good family gives up his or her life in the morning, as many times as there are grains of sand in the Ganges River, as an act of generosity, and gives as many gains in the afternoon and as many gains in the evening, and continues doing so for countless ages, and if on the other hand, another person listens to this sutra with complete confidence and without contention, the person's happiness will be far greater. But the happiness of one who writes this sutra down, receives, recites, and explains it to others cannot even be compared. It is so great. Subhuti, we can summarize by saying that the merits and virtue of this sutra is unconceivable, incalculable, and boundless. The Buddha has declared this teaching for the benefit of initiates on the path to enlightenment. He has declared it for the benefit of initiates on the path to nirvana. If there is someone capable of receiving, practicing, reciting, and sharing the sutra with others, the Buddha will see and know that person, and she or he will receive immeasurable, incalculable, and boundless merits and virtue. Such a person is known to be carrying the supreme enlightenment attained by the Buddha. Why? Subhuti, if a person is satisfied with lesser teaching than those I present here, if he or she is still caught up in the idea of self, a person, or a living thing, or universal self, then the person would not be able to listen, to receive, recite, or explain this sutra to others. Subhuti, wherever this sutra shall be observed, studied, and explained, that place will become sacred ground to which countless spiritually advanced beings will bring offerings. Such place, however humble they may be, will be revered as though they were famous temples, and countless pilgrims will come there to worship. Such a place is assurance and should be venerated with formal ceremonies and offerings, flowers and incense. That is the power of this sutra. Furthermore, Subhuti, if a good man or a good woman who accepts, upholds, read, or recite the sutra is distrained or slandered, if they are despised or insulted, it means that in prior lives they committed evil acts and as a result are now suffering the fruit of their actions. When their prior life evil acts have finally been dissolved and extinguished, he or she will attain the supreme clarity of the most fulfilled and awakened mind. Subhuti, in ancient times before the met Dipankara Buddha, I have made offerings to and had been attendant of all 84,000 million Buddhas. If someone is able to receive, recite, study, and practice the sutra in a later, more distant age, then the happiness and merits brought about by this virtuous act would be hundreds of thousands of times greater than that which I brought about my service to Buddha in ancient times. In fact, such happiness and merits cannot be conceived or compared with anything, even mathematically. If I were to explain all this in detail, now some people might become suspicious and disbelieving, and their minds may become disoriented and confused. Subhuti, you should know that the meaning of the sutra is beyond conceptions and discussion. Likewise, the fruit resulting from receiving and practicing the sutra is beyond the conception and discussion. At that time, the Venerable Subhuti then asked the Buddha, World-honored one, May I ask you a question again? If son or daughter of a good family wants to develop the highest, most fulfilled, and awakened mind, if they wish to attain the highest perfect wisdom, what should they do to help with their drifting mind and master their thinking? Subhuti, a good son or daughter who wants to give rise to the highest, most fulfilled, and awakened mind must create this resolved attitude of mind. I must help to lead all beings to the shore of awakening, but after the senses, these beings have become liberated. In truth, I know that not even a single being has been liberated. Why is this so? If a disciple cherishes the idea of a self, a person, a living being, or a universal self, then person is not an authentic disciple. Why? Because in fact there is no independently existing objects of minds called the highest, most fulfilled, and awakened mind. What do you think, Subhuti? In ancient time, when the Buddha was living with the Ankatra Buddha, did he attain anything called the highest, most fulfilled, and awakened mind? No, most honored one. According to what I understood from the teaching of the Buddha, there is no attaining of anything called the highest, most fulfilled, and awakened mind. The Buddha said, "You are correct, Subhuti. In fact, there does not exist any so-called highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind that the Buddha attains, because if there had been any such thing, the Pankara Buddha should not have predicted of me. In the future you will come to be Buddha known as the most honored one." This prediction was made because there is in fact nothing to be attained. Someone would be mistaken to say that the Buddha has attained the highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind, because there is no such thing as highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind to be obtained. Subhuti, a comparison can be made with an idea of a large human body. What would you understand me to mean if I spoke of a large human body? I would understand that the Buddha was speaking of a large human body not as an arbitrary conception of its being, but as a series of words only. I would understand that the words carries merely an imaginary meaning. When the Buddha speaks of a large human body, he uses the words only as words. Subhuti, it is just the same when the disciple speaks liberating numberless sentient being. If they have in mind any arbitrary conceptions of sentient beings or of definite numbers, then they are unworthy of being called a disciple. Subhuti, my teaching revealed that even such a thing is called a disciple is not existence. Furthermore, there is really nothing for a disciple to be liberated. A true disciple knows that there is no such thing as self, a person, a living being, or a universal self. A true disciple knows that all things are devoid of selfhood, devoid of any separate individuality. To make this teaching even more emphatic, the Buddha continued, "If a disciple were to speak as follows, I have to create serene and beautiful Buddha field, that person is not yet truly a disciple. Why? What the Buddha calls a serene and beautiful Buddha field is not in fact a serene and beautiful Buddha field, and that is why it is called the serene and beautiful Buddha field. Subhuti, only a disciple who is wholly devoid of any conceptions of separate selfhood is worthy of being called a disciple."